and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Or should I say, g'day, Bruce. No more attempts at an Australian accent. I'm not that good at it. Thankfully, I'm a little bit better at tasting whiskey. So that's the main thing, isn't it, really? So yes, Australia, or the land of Oz, shall we say. That's the theme for this week's episode of the show. And hey, it's always nice to kind of branch out a bit and taste the whiskies from other countries. And the reason for doing Australia this week is that back before Christmas I was paid a visit by the rep for Starward, or the New World Whisky Distillery in New South Wales, and it was kind of convincing me to sort of give their whiskies another try. And I tasted this particular bottling, the Ampera cask, or the Hellyers Solera, or whatever you want to call it, and it was not one I overly warmed to, and I think I did an episode of the show on it, well, probably a long time ago. I forget now. I mean, I've done too many of the things, so I forget when. I'm always game to try again. Might have changed a bit. The juice might have changed, my opinions might have changed. All that kind of thing. And it's always nice to sort of revisit a whiskey, and it will either sort of reinforce your opinions of that whiskey, or it might make you take a completely different view of that whiskey. But so it left me a couple of samples, and they've been sat around ever since, and I've been trying to figure out a way of kind of shoehorning them into an episode of the show, and completely forgotten that for round one of this year's, or the 2019 World Whisky Awards, I indeed tasted Australian single malt. So when all the winners and what have you were announced, and I received a list of what I'd tasted for round one, I thought, well, here's a perfect example. So basically, what we've got today is, like I said, the two bottlings from the New World Distillery, along with 4 that I've chosen from the samples that I received for the World Whisky Awards. It includes the usual, the sort of the establishment of Australian whisky, as in the Lark Distillery and Hellyers Road, both of which are based in Tasmania, and I've done episodes of the show on them before, so no need to really go into any detail on that. Interestingly enough, there was 2 whiskies that I'd never actually heard of, and from distilleries I'd never actually even heard of. I mean, this is the thing, I'm very much out of the loop when it comes to sort of Australia and certain parts of Europe and that kind of thing. One was a distillery called the Mount Uncle Distillery in North Queensland, founded by a chap called Mark Watkins in 2001, and interesting enough, if you look on their website, the guy actually has a passing resemblance to Brian Johnson, the ex-lead singer of AC/DC. I mean, it might be down to the fact that he's got curly hair and is wearing a flat cap, possibly, but to me he had a passing resemblance, so I'm thinking, wow, the guy obviously must be to AC/DC, it's got to be cool, Anyway, so the distillery apparently was originally distilling things like gin and making fruit liqueurs. I also believe they make rum and vodka from everything sourced locally from sort of farms around the Mount Uncle. Strange name for a mountain, but there you go. It's called the Mount Uncle. I'm guessing that's obviously got some kind of heritage thing, I suppose. But the interesting thing, or kind of quirky thing, is that not only do they produce a whiskey now, they also bottled a whiskey called Big Black Cock. It kind of featured obviously on the label a picture of a black cockerel, and I believe this bottling has now since been, shall we say, discontinued, and I wonder why. It's certainly, shall we say, rather typically Australian and un-PC. I mean, just imagine it. You're standing with your break time, chatting over the water cooler with your mates in the office, and one says, "So, what did you get up to at the weekend?" "Well, I was having a bit of Big Black Cock, actually." Yes, much hilarity, it has to be said. But anyway, we're not tasting that this afternoon, although it would be intriguing, shall we say. But anyway, I think enough of that. So the other bottling that the other whiskey that is completely and utterly new to me is called the Watkins single malt. No, it's not. It's called the Old Kempton. Because the Watkins single malt is just the one I've been talking about. Oh dear. It's going to be one of those episodes, isn't it? Anyway, no, look, so this Old Kempton Distillery, again, one I'd never actually heard of, so a little bit of digging, and there's not a huge amount of information online, bizarrely enough. I mean, even their website, it seems to be a little bit sort of light on the history, but apparently I believe they were founded at some time, I don't know when exactly, as the Redlands Distillery, and then for some reason, which I can't find out why, they were forced to move to a place called Kempton in Tasmania. I'm guessing they were originally from Tasmania, and I believe they moved in sometime around 2016. And there again, their whole ethos was basically everything produced on site from barley, water source, etc., etc. So, what's the term? Is it grain to bottle? Oh, I hate that term. It's horrible. It's really been abused. It's such, you know. Anyway. So they moved to actually a rather lovely looking building, as we say. I think it's some sort of colonial building, I believe. I don't honestly know, and like I said, you know, the information seems to be somewhat sparse about the distillery. I believe they have a couple of ranges, one of which is a small batch range, I think bottled at 46%, or could be bottled at something completely different. I have absolutely no idea, because I can't remember what the ABV of this is. Oh, it's 65.4. Yeah, so, and I think they have a cask strength range, which might be single casks. Again, I'm not entirely sure, so apologies for being a bit vague about that, but it is on the other side of the world, and as far as I'm aware, they don't do a bottling called BBC. So anyway, that's a little bit of waffle about this week's episode of the show. Correct or whether it's incorrect, I have no idea, but it's amusing nevertheless. So anyway, let's have a look at today's lineup then, shall we? You should have waked up in my arms. You'll never know how much Right, okay, so first bottling today is going to be the Lark Classic Cask, bottled at 43%, and judging by the colour, maybe a bit of sherry in that, certainly probably a lot of first fill American oak. Don't really know very much about the bottling itself, but we'll see what it tastes like. Second bottling we'll be looking at is the Hellyers Road Original 15-year-old. This is bottled at 46.2, is that 46.2? 46.2. And like I said, it's 15 years old, and again I think all aged in American oak. Third bottling we'll be looking at is this one. So this is the Starward Ampera Solera. So Ampera casks, for those of you that don't know, are an Australian fortified wine similar to sherry. So obviously the distillery has a Solera system. Don't know how many caderas or layers that it actually has, but I'm guessing that this is a sort of an ongoing kind of bottling. I mean, that's the point of having a Solera, that you sort of obviously top the top layer up with the new juice, and you sort of in sherry they call it running the scales, when they basically refresh each following layer, and then they take all the juice out of the one particular barrel, which is called the Solera. So anyway, like I said, tasted it before, and we'll see what it's like this time around. Bottling number 4 is the Watkins single malt. So like I said, don't know, it's under 12 years old, that's all I know. I believe it's actually, I have some information here on it. It's aged at 7 years in actual fact, in reconditioned ex-French red wine barriques with American oak heads. So, could be interesting. Hybrid casks, always like that, you know, it's always a bit different, bit funky, bit compass boxy, you know, although we don't talk about compass box these days. So, moving quickly on. We're going to look at the second of the Starward bottlings. This is called the New World Project Wine Cask. It's batch number 2. It's bottled at 41%, and I believe it is the juice is around about 2.5 years old, and it's been aged entirely, I believe, in ex-Barossa Shiraz casks. So 2.5 years, wine casks. Okay, well, we'll keep an open mind on that one, shall we? And the last bottling we'll be looking at is the old Kempton Port Cask. Like I said, this is under 12 years old, because that was the category it was entered into, so I have no idea of what the age of it actually is. No information on their website about the bottling itself. So all I can tell you is it's bottled at 65.4%, and I'm guessing that the bottle looks like the bottle on the title page. It's not. It's the closest I could find to it, which was, I think, a single Pinot Noir cask. So anyway, so as you can see from the colour of that, I mean, that is pretty dark, it has to be said. So I'm probably expecting a lot of port. So I think this is going to be a little bit of an interesting episode. So I know there's a number of you out there that love your wine finished whiskies. So hopefully something will intrigue you. But anyway, let's kick off with a bit of classic Lark then, shall we? Now it's like we never met, and it all feels like right, okay, so let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? There's a lot of oak, there's a lot of American oak, but it's kind of quite sat back. It's not too intrusive, it's a little gritty, it's a little tannic. The spirit has definitely got a youthfulness to it. I mean, it's again, it was entered into the 12 years and under category, so it could be anything from 3 to 12, you know. I'm guessing it's not very old. What it does have is it does have some lovely estery fruit. I mean, it's a little bit tight, but there is some estery fruit, there's some pineapple, some apricot. There's a possibility there's some dried fruit in there. There might be a little bit of sherry cask used in this vatting. It's certainly got a sweetness to it. But it's got a grittiness as well, quite a tannic character, a little bit of dark chocolate as well. And actually, I quite like that. I think that's overall that's pretty well balanced. Yes, the oak is a little bit overtly noticeable on the nose, but it's not like it's completely one-dimensional. There's certainly some lovely estery fruit, getting a bit of cold tea now, and a little herbalness, sort of dried herbs possibly. It's an interesting nose, and I must say I do quite like this. Let's see what the palate's like. Young, chewy hazelnuts. Oh, just a mouthful of hazelnuts. Hazelnut skin. There's a little bit of tight tannin, hazelnutty tannin. There's some nice estery fruit. It's a little bit short. It's a little bit dry. I'm guessing again the spirit tastes relatively young. I'm going to put a little drop of water with that and just see if that kind of just knocks back some of that tannin, because it's certainly really quite tight, really feels quite closed. There's Now that's doing it some favours. I'm getting a lot more of the fruit now, a lot more of the esters. There's a little soapiness just in the background, and I'm getting more vanilla and less tight tannins. See what the palate's like now. It's softer, it's a little fruitier. Again, there's a little soapiness there. The tannins have regressed a bit, but they've kind of left a little bitterness. Again, it's nothing to get bent out of shape about. I'm certainly not getting the hazelnuts now. I've put a little drop of water with it. It's okay. It's pleasant. I haven't got a clue what it retails for. Certainly, I don't believe that it's over here in the UK. I mean, that's the thing with a lot of these Australian whiskies. They just don't make their way over to the UK. So I have no idea how much that would cost retail. So I couldn't tell you whether there's good or bad value for money. But it's okay. It's got its plus points and it's got its minus points, I think.
No memories to share and no photographs to box for life.
Okay, so let's move on to the Hellyers Road 15. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Now that is a lovely nose. Definitely showing some maturity, some of that kind of strawy, straw-like barley, touch of minerality, some apricot. There's still quite an oiliness, certainly in the background. You know, I wouldn't quite go as far as saying fainty, but there's still that kind of almost slightly raw spirit note, which I would have expected at 15 would have well and truly gone. I mean, so it's just an indicator of how long Hellyers Road would actually age for, that you're still getting a little bit of that kind of youthful spirit character at 15. It's got a lovely denseness, it's got a touch of American oak, although that American oak again is set in the background. Yeah, again, I like this. I mean, it's not sort of an exuberant fruit monster. It's got some maturity. It's quite mellow. I would guess it's probably not going to be cheap. It's a bit of sort of like dried banana skin, green gauge possibly. Yeah, I mean, it's got enough complexity to keep your interest, shall we say. See what the palate's like. Really oily on the palate initially, and it's got that almost faintiness as well, which is just like at 15. I mean, if I'd have tasted this blind without knowing anything about what its age was, I mean, I would say this was a lot younger than what it actually is. I mean, certainly comes across that way. It's a little bit short on the finish. There's some pleasant apricot. There's a little bit of banana. It's okay. It's pleasant enough. And again, I mean, I can't imagine it's going to be cheap. I haven't even got a clue what it would retail for in the UK if it ever got over to the UK. But I imagine that's going to be big bucks. And I'm guessing I would say I'm maybe a little ambivalent about it. It's well made, even if it is sort of showing that kind of youthful kind of edge to it, which realistically it shouldn't have at that kind of age. Maybe it would be interesting to see what it's like at 30 if it still had that kind of edge to it. So I mean, God only knows what their new made tastes like. I mean, that must be really undrinkable stuff. Must be really heavy and oily and fainty, and you know, if it's still got an element of that at 15 anyway. But so yeah, okay. It again, it's okay. It's pleasant. It's not sort of earth shattering, but it's not sort of. You get what I mean.
It's like we never met, and it all feels
Right, okay, so let's move on to the Starward. So this is the Ampera Solera bottling, bottled at 43%. Let's see what those give us. Lots of sherry, lots of toffee, lots of winey, sweet, macerated fruit. There's a touch of lime, there's a touch of barley, there's a touch of sweet barley, sweet apricot. But it really is very, very, very sherried. I mean, it's not that kind of herbally oloroso-y sort of sherry. It's that sweet, almost kind of liqueur-y kind of sherry character. I mean, yes, I will say that there is some obvious estery, banana-y kind of fruit beneath that. It certainly seems to show a little bit more balance than I remember it. But I remember it also being pretty expensive as well, and yeah, it's got some gooseberry, sweet gooseberry. It's sweet. It's a sweet nose. It's really sweet. There's not enough citrus, or minerality, or a balance against that sweetness. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that like this kind of style, but yeah, let's see what that's like. Sweet, creamy, dried fruits, sweet raisins, sun-dried raisins, sultana, touch of barley, bit drying, bit tannic, bit bitter on the finish. Again, I'm kind of sort of, should we say, slightly ambivalent about this particular bottling. The balance does seem a little better than I remember it. Maybe that's kind of maybe that's because it has a better balance. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I remember it being more heavily sherried. I don't know. Yeah, again, it's okay. It's a sort of, I think it's a sort of style of whiskey that you have to like. I mean, I don't dislike it. It's just that I'm not going to rave about it, if you see what I mean. But I think sort of overall, it's pleasant. There's nothing wrong with it. Maybe a bit expensive for what it actually is, but you know, nothing wrong with the juice. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Watkins Whisky Company. Now, another thing, just to, you know, we're not going back to you know what, but one thing I would like to say about this particular bottling is I love the bottle. I mean, it is just so funky, and I know that bottle shapes, labels, yada yada, packaging is all frippery. Is at the end of the day is all well and good, but it's the juice that counts. But I do like the almost wine bottle kind of shape to the bottle. So I'm hoping that as much TLC and interest has gone into the whiskies as gone into the bottling, or the bottle design, should we say. Okay, it's interesting. Subtle, slightly estery fruit, dark chocolate, spicy red fruits, touch of marzipan, some red licorice. There's a touch of Mar, a little bit of Mar. It certainly seems quite young. Again, I would be sort of saying, I mean, although this is about 7 years old, it feels a little younger. It's got a vibrancy to it, and yeah, I kind of quite like this in a sort of weird kind of way. Yeah, it's got intensity, you know, and it does indeed have an element of balance. It's got a sweet red fruit, a little bit of chocolatiness, you know. It's a bit raw, possibly at the edges, but you know, I'll forgive it that. You know, it's a bit of for those of you that are about to rock kind of thing, you know. A bit of, well, it's not quite down and dirty, but it's kind of a bit, you know, your mother wouldn't like it kind of thing, you know. How many more musical metaphors can I cram into this tasting note? Yeah, I like the sort of the sort of green banana-y, estery kind of character that's kind of just still about there, and it's considering, like I said, it's a hybrid, you know, French red wine, American oak kind of cask. It's actually pretty balanced, and I remember when I looked at my notes and scores. Once I knew what everything was, I'd given this the highest score to be honest with you, it's got personality, I think. Anyway, let's see what the power's like. It's young, it's rose petally, it's marry, sweet mar, lovely sweet red fruits kind of coating, all of that, touch of American oak, a little bit of vanilla, really juicy, wonderfully long, elegant. That is a lovely whiskey, really well balanced. You've got to like the style, you've got to like young whiskey, you've got to like that slightly youthful, rose petally, character, and it's not fainty. That's the point. Yes, it tastes young, yes, it's got that sort of edge to it, but it's not fainty, it's not oily, it's crisp, it's clean, and do you know what, I really like that. I mean, you know, I think that is a seriously very, very good whiskey. I think given a few more years, just to sort of take off that kind of rose petally youthful note, I think sort of maybe another 3 or 4 years would see that develop really, really nicely. I wonder whether the red wine would kind of develop a little bit too much. I mean, what I might, if this was my whiskey, I might consider taking it out of these hybrid casks and just giving it maybe another 3 or 4 years in an American oak barrel, probably second fill, so not too much more oak character. Just give it a chance just to round off, lose some of the edge, and maybe mellow down a little bit of the sort of like the wine character. Because I think if that was another maybe 3 or 4 years in a wine cask, it would start to just sort of dominate a little bit too much. But who knows? Don't know. I mean, you know, does anybody listen to me? I don't bloody know. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Starward New World Wine Project, wine cask batch number 2. Well, that's a bloody mouthful and a half, isn't it? Anyway, so two and a bit years old, ex-Barossa Shiraz. Okay. Sweet, Shirazi, blackcurrant, marzipan, big wine. There's this kind. I can see a little bit of youthful spirit sort of in the background underneath all of that. I mean, it's a bit of a crowd pleaser. It's Shirazi. It's big. It's boisterous. It's shall we say slightly typically Australian. None of your restrained character here, Bruce. It's in your face. It's kind of, you know, it is what it is. I think is the sort of the way I would describe it. It's not unpleasant, but there's no real balance there whatsoever. It's all you wouldn't eat. I mean, you wouldn't expect 2.5 years in a Shiraz cask or casks. You know, you really wouldn't expect a great deal of balance. It has to be said, and you know, I can see people kind of like really getting into this and loving this. You know, it is, if you love that sort of big over winey kind of character. I mean, it's very clean. There's no blemishes, no off notes. It's obviously very well put together. It's, you know, very classy. It's just for me, it just kind of lacks some balance. So anyway, let's see what the palate's like. Sweet blackcurrant fruit, touch of spice, vanilla ice cream, more fruit, more Shiraz, more spice. Yeah, it's pretty one-dimensional, it has to be said, and you know, you'd probably be bloody amazed if it wasn't, to be honest with you. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is at the end of the day. Would I pay 50 odd quid for a bottle of that? I don't think so, personally. I mean, there are probably a number of you that would love this. You'd probably have orgasms over this. You know, it's kind of, you know, like I said, it is very Australian. You know, it's not subtle. It's very much in your face. It's kind of like big wine, big oak. And some of you are going to love that, you know. Me personally, like I said, I'm a little bit more of a purist. I like a bit more balance in my whiskey, etc., 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 etc.
No fairy tales to tell, no memories to share.
Balance. Yeah, I don't know about this one, but anyway, so this is the old Kempton Port Cask, and by God, look at the colour of that, will you? Am I expecting any distillery character? I'm going to shut up and stick my nose in the glass. Joe, it's just kind of, and this is no disrespect to this whiskey whatsoever. It's one of these sort of whiskies you can practically write the tasting note from actually looking at the colour. Yes, it's porty. It's dried fruit. It's dried red fruit, black fruit, spice, herbs. Yeah, I couldn't tell you whether there's any distillery character there. Well, there is no distillery character because I can't actually find anything. It's intense. It's boisterous. It's bloody Australian again, isn't it? It's just kind of like subtlety. We don't do bloody subtlety. I mean, okay, so I'm probably being kind of, what's the word? Obvious. No. Australians do have, shall we say, a little bit of a reputation for lack of subtlety and, shall we say, bluntness and ball tampering. Ooh, no, I thought I'd get away with that entire episode without mentioning tampering with the balls, but oh dear, I have indeed. I feel a bit like Jeremy Clarkson then, good God. Anyway, back to the whiskey. It is what it is. It's what you would expect. I mean, it's a mammoth port cask, winey, spirity, intense. I mean, again, this was the 12 years old and under. I've got no idea how long it's spent in this cask, but not very long. Again, it's very clean, there's no blemishes, no off notes, etc, etc, and it is what it is. If you love those big porty notes, this is definitely for you, but there's a bit of raw cereal kind of coming through now, but yeah, yeah, cask 1, distillery character 0, I think. Anyway, let's see what that's got like. Ooh, it's got some kick. In a kind of masochistic way, I kind of quite like that palate. It's actually some peat smoke. I don't know whether the barley's peated or not, but I certainly got some peat smoke. Really intense, really winey, alcoholic. I mean, so not integrated whatsoever. It tasted initially, I thought, well, the alcohol's pretty well integrated. It's quite winey. It's got that syrupy coating to the alcohol, and then it hit the mid palate, and it's kind of like, oh my God, it's sucking the hell out of me. Oh, it's intense. It's winey. It's black fruit and again, like I said, it is what it is. It's unashamedly port cask, and I suppose you've kind of got to give it credit for that. Balance, yeah, well, sod that. You know, we're just going to whack it in this port cask and give it some hell, as they say. And water really makes absolutely no difference at all to the nose. Yeah, it's a little bit more herbal, but there's no spirit character here whatsoever. It's all port cask. Let's see what the pal's like now. It's a lot sweeter, it's syrupier, it's winier. It lacks that punch, that intensity, that kind of grabbing you by the googlies kind of character. It's all very soft and it's all very syrupy and it's all very porty. And I guess, yeah, there are going to be people who love this kind of stuff, you know. I mean, again, the juice seems to be of a really good quality. I've got no issue with that whatsoever. The only issue I have is that it has no character other than the port cask. I'd love to taste their spirit out of an American oak cask, and so if anybody from the distillery is watching and probably doesn't want to shoot me, I would love to get a sample of your American oak aged juice, if you do such a thing. And to a certain extent, same with the Uncle Distillery, if Mark is watching this. I've got no idea whether he will or not, and whether or not he'd want to sort of shoot me again because of what I've said about his whiskey. But I thought his whiskey was bloody good, you know. But just distillery character, that's what I want to see. You know, you taste a whiskey from Scotland, Australia, America, wherever. I really want to say what the spirit is saying, what the you know, what the distillery has done to the spirit. That's what I want to know. I don't want to know all about what the bloody cask has done to it. You know, I want to know what the distillery is all about. You know, does it have tall neck stills? Does it have short fat stills? Does it have purifiers? Does it have, you know, condensers, shell and tube, or worm tubs? You know, why go to all the bloody trouble of setting out your distillery to produce a certain style of spirit if you're just going to swamp it in a cask? You know, that to me has not made any sense. But anyway, that's I'm kind of almost summing up before I've summed up, so I shall now properly sum up. Right, okay, so I better get on with this because there's not a lot much time left. So the Lark Classic Cask. I've tasted better bottlings from the Lark Distillery, it has to be said. This just seems like it's an entry-level whiskey. It's okay. It's pluses and minuses, I think, as I said earlier. Hellyers Road 15-year-old. Again, I'm not sort of kind of like falling in love with this particular whiskey. Again, it's okay. Starward Ampera. I don't love it enough to want to buy the thing, but I think it's certainly come across better than I remember it. Whether that's because I remember it to be more heavily sherried, I don't know. Whether it's the fog of memory, isn't it? So. Yeah, I kind of like, sort of liked it ish, if you see what I mean. The Watkins Whisky, I think, yeah, definitely my kind of whiskey to a certain extent. If I was going to go for something heavily winey, I think it's got some nice balance to it. The Starward, yeah, well, I think my tasting earlier has kind of said it all, just all about the cask. And the old Kempton, well, yes, if you love your port, you're going to love it. So, yeah. Anyway, that's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I think I've rabbited for long enough. I think I'm probably on the hit list of a lot of Australians, so I'm going to hightail it to somewhere like South America, I think. But no. Anyway, all that's left to say is good gramming and good afternoon.